Okay, so as football approaches, we know that today's the start of OTAs. I'm super excited about it. I start thinking about a lot of football this time of the year. Speaking of which, leave your comments. Let me know what's your favorite all-time football movie. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. You got Blindside, you got Friday Night Lights, you got Remember the Titans, We Are Marshall. For me, the movie that takes the cake is Remember the Titans. There's not a movie I think that was better directed than that. You've also got Radio, Rudy. I think I already mentioned that, but a lot of good football movies out there. Leave your comments. Let me know your thoughts. Okay, so as we approach OTAs, NFL Network put out an article saying that the things to watch for the Packers when you start talking about the OTAs, and they're not wrong, but I think that there's something greater to watch, and I think it's the Green Bay's defense just became a very big problem. We're going to stress that and talk about that here in a moment, but NFL Network says, hey, listen, the Packers by design have maintained a young and deep wide receiving room at the quarterback, Jordan Love, since he's taken over for Aaron Rodgers. And we know that Brian Gutekunst this offseason went and addressed at the first round, making history for the Packers, something that they don't typically do. They sign Matthew Golden, and then they get this Swiss Army knife type wide receiver in Savion Williams, 6'4", 222 pounds, ran a 4.48. He's got to work on his hands, but there's a lot of weapons that Jordan Love has at the wide receiving. Who's going to step up? Who's going to take that number one role, as that leadership for the Packers? That's certainly going to be something to watch as we approach training day and all of that type of stuff. But when it comes to OTAs, I think something that is going to become glaringly obvious for the Packers is that their defense is going to be something to be reckoned with. They lost Slayton. We know that that's, a hole that they had to fill. But I think Devontae White is somebody that's going to step up and certainly take the reins there. You got guys like Carl Brooks. But I want to talk about the edge for the Packers. Okay, so you got Lucas Van Ness, who was drafted in the top 10 for the Packers. We know that this dude was raw coming into the NFL out of college. Okay, so his lack of experience playing football, but we know that Gutekunst saw something in him. Doesn't mean that that necessarily he's going to pan out to be a top 10 defensive pick or NFL player in this league. However, we do know that this dude has got a ton of talent. And we know that he's bound to take a leap forward at some point in time. Kind of reminds me of Sean Gary. Sean Gary started out a bit slow. Then you've got Rashawn Gary, who's an absolute beast on one end. So who's going to flip the bill? So, Lucas Van Ness and Rashawn Gary are pretty much the only two shoo-ins when we start talking about starters, or guys that are going to make the 53-man roster. Okay, so but when you start looking at who the Packers went out and drafted, okay, so this is going to get quite interesting. Okay, so one of the guys that was an undrafted free agent that I absolutely loved out of Florida is a guy in Bretton Cox Jr. Okay, so Bretton Cox Jr. had a really good year. Okay, so if you look at his stats, and I love talking about this dude because I'm super hyped about this guy. He made some bad decisions in college. I think a lot of people do. And then it's like, okay, I really want to get my life back together. The Packers see something in me. I want to give them my all. And he had a really good season. When you take into effect that the dude really only played about 7 games, in those 7 games, he had 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble. The dude was everywhere. Okay, so he looked super good, and he, started pushing out playing time for Lucas Van Ness and guys like that. Okay, so Brenton Cox Jr., though, is one of those guys. Okay, when you take a look at his PFF score, he had a 72.2. Okay. Then you got Kingsley Enagbare on the other side, right? So Kingsley Enagbare had a good season. He really did. 4.5 sacks, 16 solo tackles, 2 forced fumbles. He played most of the season, a lot of playing time there, much more than Brenton Cox did or got, because then the Packers moved on, Preston Smith, all that stuff. So you got Kingsley Enagbare, who's going to be a force to be reckoned with. He didn't have as great of a PFF score. He had a 56 overall. Okay, so if it's stacking up, oranges versus oranges, that's not a comparison. Bretton Cox Jr. had a way more successful, better season in the short interim that he played. He had a 56. So this is Enagbare had a 56 overall score. His pass rush grade was a 57.8. That's something that they really struggled in. And then you got run defense grade of a 64.5. Okay, so Bretton Cox, when you look at his scores, he had a 72.2 total, 72 rush score. They were better out when he was out there. They had a better pass rush attack, and then a run defensive grade of a 65.5. And then you look to the, another guy that's there is Aaron Mosby, right? Aaron Mosby played a decent amount of snaps. He had more snaps, I think, than Bretton Cox did, or at least played in more games, I should say. He had a half a sack, 6 solo tackles, not as successful when you look at the stat book. But then you look to the draft and you see a guy in uh, Byron Sorrell out of Texas, who I really, really like. Okay. There's a lot of upside with this dude. He had a grade of a 6.25 coming in to the draft. He's super athletic, athletic score of a 78, total score of a 69. We know that this guy, he's got a lot to bring the NFL. He's got upper body power. He can punch. He's great with his hands. Okay. He wins those battles. Okay. And speaking of which, we're gonna check out just how the quickness of him off the line, all that stuff. Let's check out this real quick. Turns corner quick. That's going to be something that the Packers can expect, and that's going to be a battle when you start talking about the guys that are on the Packers roster. When you look at edge rush, all that stuff. Another guy that I want to mention is Colin Oliver. He had that foot injury coming out of Oklahoma State. And he's got a really good athletic score there of an 80, and then an overall score of a 69, 6.15 total grade there. But this is a dude that also has a lot of strengths to him as well. He's has it says right here he has athletic qualities, and man coverage, all of that stuff. We know that this dude can bring it. Okay, so here's a little bit of highlights on him right here.
Tape on him, you can see he's got twitch and explosiveness off the edge that brings a little bit more of a unique skill set that way. He's one of the best spear pass rushers. Great efforts to rip him down. The story Lambeau field, you got cheesehead, banter and fame. So I can't wait to fill into that mold and just be a part of the organization.
Dude, that doesn't pump you up, man. So here's the thing with the Packers is when we start talking about this defense, they they became a problem for the NFC North. They really did. When you take a look at the roster and how Brian Gutekunst is building it, and you talk about Lucas Van Ness on one end, and I think he's going to take a really big step forward. I really do. And if he doesn't, that that would be okay because the Packers have got a ton of depth there. And when you mention the name Bretton Cox Jr., for me, I get super pumped. I think this dude is an animal. I think he proved it last season when given the opportunity. Now, whether or not he's going to be on the chopping block when we start doing roster cuts, you've got guys like Aaron Mosby who are, going to be there, Colin Oliver, Kingsley Egnekbari. And then you've got Sorrell, right? So who's going to be, how many guys are they going to keep? 5? Are they going to keep 6 edge rushers? And if they keep 6, like that means then Aaron Mosby is going to have to get cut when given the opportunity, just to mention those guys that we just talked about. Or if they keep 5, that means Aaron Mosby potentially, like it depends on what Aaron Mosby does this offseason, or Bretton Cox or Egnekbari or Colin Oliver, somebody like that is going to have to get signed to the practice squad, which then, we're in jeopardy of losing that talent. But leave your comments. Let me know your thoughts here. It's a great problem to have if you're a Packer fan, because edge rushing was certainly an issue for them coming into this offseason. And a lot of people thought that the Packers, Brian Gutekunst was going to address that in free agency. He didn't need to, because we've got a lot of talent there in Bretton Cox. And then they get Sorrell in the draft, and then they get Oliver. And then you've got guys like Kingsley Egnekbari, I think, who when given opportunities, I think he and Cox were fantastic this last year. So leave your comments. Let me know who you think the Packers are going to have to cut ties with at some point, and it's going to be interesting to watch in OTAs as they begin. But as always, go Pack Go.